Ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight to the truth, because truth has a way of cutting through the noise. Extraordinary minds are not misunderstood because they are wrong. They are misunderstood because they dare to see the world differently. And difference has always been unsettling to the ordinary. Think about it. History is filled with individuals who thought in ways that broke the mold. At first, they were mocked, doubted, and rejected, not because their vision lacked power, but because it demanded courage from everyone else to keep up. And courage is rare. Ordinary people live in the comfort of conformity. Extraordinary minds, they thrive in discomfort. They choose the unpaved road. They create where others copy. They challenge where others comply. When you think differently, you become a mirror to those who don't. Your vision forces people to confront their limitations, and not everyone is ready for that reflection. So they label you too much, too intense, too ambitious. That's not about you. It's about their fear. Understand this: their misunderstanding is not your problem. Their disbelief is not your burden. And their rejection is not your ending. It is the beginning of your rise. Extraordinary minds cannot be explained in the language of the ordinary. You cannot expect people who live within walls to comprehend the freedom of someone who builds wings. You cannot expect people who play it safe to understand those who play for impact. Ordinary people misunderstand extraordinary minds because the extraordinary forces them to imagine what they themselves never dared to pursue. And that's uncomfortable. But here's the secret: extraordinary minds don't wait for understanding. They keep moving. They keep building. They keep creating until the very world that once misunderstood them has no choice but to follow. That is the rhythm of greatness. First, they doubt you. Then they fight you. And finally, they ask you how you did it. So the question is not, why don't they understand me? The question is, am I willing to keep going without their approval? Because the extraordinary is not about being liked. It's about being true. True to your vision. True to your fight. True to the fire inside you that says, I was not put here to be ordinary. You will be misunderstood. You will be doubted. You will be resisted. Good. That means you are on the right track. Extraordinary paths are never crowded. So stand tall in your difference. Own your vision. Carry the weight of misunderstanding with pride, because the day will come when the very people who dismissed you will look up and realize you were never ordinary. You were extraordinary all along. Now, stop waiting for permission, stop shrinking yourself to fit in, and stop apologizing for seeing more. Step into your difference. Live with it. Build with it. And show the world that extraordinary minds don't just change the conversation. They change the future. Extraordinary minds are often misunderstood, not because they are wrong, but because they see the world differently. And that difference has always unsettled the ordinary. The truth is that people are comfortable with patterns, with structures, with traditions that have existed long before them, because those patterns give them a sense of security. When someone comes along who dares to question those patterns, who dares to think beyond the boundaries, they immediately disturb that sense of security. The ordinary mind thrives on predictability, on routine, on staying within the limits that have been socially accepted, but extraordinary minds are not content with such confinements. They look at what already exists and ask, why must it stay this way? What if it could be better? What if it could be bigger? What if we could go further? These questions are unsettling to the ordinary because they expose the fragility of the comfort zone. When an extraordinary thinker presents their vision, their ideas often sound unrealistic, idealistic, or even impossible to those who cannot perceive beyond what is already tangible. People are quick to dismiss what they do not understand because dismissal is easier than wrestling with the discomfort of transformation. That is why so many pioneers were called dreamers, fools, even threats in their time. They weren't misunderstood because their ideas lacked sense. They were misunderstood because their vision demanded a shift, and the ordinary mind resists shifts with all its strength. To shift means to let go of what you know, and for many people, letting go feels like losing themselves. Ordinary people misunderstand extraordinary minds because they mistake vision for arrogance. They look at someone who dares to dream bigger and interpret it as someone trying to act superior. They confuse ambition with defiance and courage with rebellion. They assume that because someone is unwilling to follow the same steps as everyone else, that person is trying to dismiss or invalidate their way of life. But the extraordinary mind is not trying to prove superiority. It is trying to explore possibility. The mistake is in the perception. The ordinary mind thinks the extraordinary is rejecting them, when in truth, the extraordinary is simply following a different calling. There is also the factor of fear, a powerful emotion that dictates how people react to those who are different. Fear whispers that if someone succeeds in doing the impossible, then everyone else has no excuse for staying small. Fear tells people that if someone can think and act at a higher level, then it reveals their own unwillingness to rise. And so, instead of celebrating the extraordinary, they criticize it, not because the extraordinary is wrong, but because it reminds them of what they are not willing to do. Misunderstanding then becomes a shield to protect the ego. By saying you're unrealistic, you're naive, you're wrong. The ordinary person comforts themselves into believing they are justified in staying where they are. Extraordinary minds see patterns invisible to others. They connect ideas that seem unrelated. They question assumptions that most people accept as facts. This way of thinking can make them appear confusing or even threatening to people who depend on certainty. To someone who only knows how to walk in a straight line, the person who zigzags, leaps, or flies seems reckless. But the truth is that extraordinary minds have the ability to see beyond the horizon. They carry within them a vision that others cannot yet imagine, and because of that, they often walk alone in the early stages of their journey. Loneliness is often the companion of those who think differently, not because they are unworthy of company, but because they cannot expect understanding from those who are not ready to see what they see. Think about how children with strong imaginations are often told to stop dreaming and be realistic. That is the beginning of how ordinary minds are shaped, by training them to dismiss imagination in favor of conformity. But the extraordinary never loses that ability to imagine. They preserve the part of themselves that dares to think of what could be, even when the world demands they only accept what already is. This clash between imagination and conformity is at the core of why ordinary people misunderstand extraordinary minds. Imagination feels like rebellion to those who were taught that safety lies in conformity. When you look at innovators, leaders, artists, thinkers who changed the course of humanity, you will notice a pattern. Their brilliance was rarely accepted immediately. In fact, most of them were laughed at, ignored, or even attacked before their contributions were recognized. This is the natural rhythm of the extraordinary: rejection first, validation later. The misunderstanding is not a flaw in the extraordinary. It is a mirror of the limitations of the ordinary. It shows us how deeply ingrained comfort and predictability are in the human psyche. To be extraordinary is to endure misunderstanding as a test of resilience. It is to hold on to vision even when no one else validates it. The ordinary often demands evidence before belief. They need to see results before they accept ideas. Extraordinary minds, however, believe before evidence exists. They create the evidence by daring to act on vision. This gap between belief and evidence is where misunderstanding thrives. The extraordinary mind says, I see it, therefore I will move toward it. The ordinary mind says, I will only believe it once it's proven. This difference in approach ensures that until the extraordinary succeeds, they will always be questioned. But it is in the persistence through questioning, the courage to keep going despite disbelief, that extraordinary ideas come to life. The misunderstanding, then, is not something to fear or avoid. It is part of the process. Ordinary people misunderstanding extraordinary minds is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of being ahead. When the masses cannot yet understand, it means the vision is still out of reach, still forming, still too advanced to be digested. And that is exactly what makes it extraordinary. Extraordinary minds are misunderstood because they challenge comfort, expose fear, question assumptions, and demand a level of imagination that most people have been taught to suppress. They do not fit into boxes, they do not play by the rules of conformity, and they do not wait for permission to think differently. This naturally creates a disconnect between them and those who choose the safety of the ordinary path. Misunderstanding is inevitable, but it is also the clearest indicator that someone is walking the road less traveled, the road that leads not to sameness, but to transformation. Rejection, doubt, and misunderstanding are signs that you are on the right track, because greatness never arrives dressed in comfort and acceptance. It arrives cloaked in resistance. When people doubt you, when they tell you your dreams are unrealistic, when they laugh at your vision or criticize your ambition, it is not because your path lacks validity, it is because your path threatens the very structure of their own belief system. Ordinary minds want proof before they believe, but extraordinary journeys require belief before proof exists. That tension between what you see and what others refuse to see creates the gap where rejection thrives. And it is in that very gap that greatness is born. Rejection is often perceived as failure, but in reality, rejection is a mirror that reflects back the limitations of those around you. When people reject your ideas, they are not rejecting your worth, they are rejecting their own ability to see beyond the horizon. They are telling you more about themselves than about you. To be on the right track means that you are operating at a frequency that others cannot yet tune into. Like a broadcast that hasn't reached the receiver, your vision feels foreign to those who are still standing in yesterday. Their rejection is not a stop sign. It is confirmation that you are walking into a space they cannot yet enter. Doubt operates in the same way. Doubt from others is not a verdict on your capacity, but a reflection of their own fears projected onto you. People doubt what they do not understand. They doubt what does not match their sense of safety. If you announce that you want to build something that has never been built, create a business that changes the way things work, or chase a dream that seems larger than life, their minds automatically reach for all the reasons it will not work. That is how the ordinary protects itself. It wraps itself in skepticism. But your role is not to internalize their doubt. Your role is to use it as fuel. Their doubt should be the signal that you are stretching boundaries. If no one doubts you, then you are not dreaming big enough. Misunderstanding is the third signal, and it is often the most difficult one to endure because it isolates you. To be misunderstood means people misinterpret your intentions, your choices, and even your character. They may call you reckless, arrogant, unrealistic, or stubborn, when in truth you are simply refusing to conform. Misunderstanding stings because it can feel deeply personal, but it is also one of the most reliable indicators that you are carving a path that is uniquely yours. If people understood you completely, it would mean you are operating within the same limits as them. And that is not where greatness lives. Greatness lives in the space where understanding comes only after the results are undeniable. Think about how every innovator, every leader, every revolutionary thinker was first dismissed before being celebrated. The most transformative ideas were first rejected by the world because they did not fit into what was already known. Airplanes, electricity, the internet, space travel, social reform, art that broke traditions, all of these began as ideas that met walls of rejection and doubt. The extraordinary is always ridiculed before it is revered. The pattern is so consistent that you can measure your trajectory by the level of resistance you face. If people are rejecting you, doubting you, misunderstanding you, it does not mean you are failing. It means you are ahead. Rejection, doubt, and misunderstanding are not detours. They are milestones. Each time you encounter them, you are passing through a stage that confirms you are moving forward. Imagine a road that only the brave walk, and along that road are signs. Each sign says, rejection here, doubt here, misunderstanding here. Those signs are not warnings to turn back. They are markers telling you, yes, this is the right way. Keep going. The reason ordinary people cannot reach extraordinary heights is because they interpret those signs as reasons to stop. They face rejection and think it means they are unworthy. They encounter doubt and think it means they should shrink their vision. They feel misunderstood and think it means they should conform. But the extraordinary know better. They know those signs mean they are on the exact road where change is born. The process of being doubted, rejected, and misunderstood also serves another purpose. It sharpens you. It tests your resolve, it forces you to clarify your vision, and it strengthens your inner conviction. If everyone immediately accepted your ideas, you would never learn resilience. If everyone supported your path, you would never grow the muscle to keep walking when you are alone. Greatness is not built in crowds, it is built in solitude, in those moments where you face rejection after rejection and still move forward. It is built in those nights when doubt surrounds you but you choose belief anyway. It is built in those seasons when no one understands you, but you keep building anyway. Rejection gives you the opportunity to prove persistence. Doubt gives you the chance to prove faith. Misunderstanding gives you the stage to prove clarity. Each is a challenge disguised as opposition, and each is necessary for transformation. You cannot expect to build something extraordinary without first walking through the fire of disbelief. The fire is what burns away hesitation and leaves behind only determination. There is a reason why people admire success stories only after the fact. Once the results are visible, once the vision has been brought to life, then suddenly everyone claims they always believed in it. But in the beginning, the extraordinary is always invisible to the masses. And this is the paradox. The very things that cause others to reject and doubt you now will later be the reasons they admire you. The same people who misunderstand you today will one day quote you, follow you, and study you, because hindsight always makes the extraordinary look obvious. But your role is not to wait for hindsight. Your role is to move forward in foresight. When rejection comes, remember it is not the end of the road, it is part of the road. When doubt surrounds you, remember it is not a reflection of your weakness, it is a projection of theirs. When misunderstanding isolates you, remember it is not a sign you should stop. It is proof that you are leading the way into uncharted territory. These are not setbacks, they are confirmations. Ordinary people live within walls while extraordinary minds build wings, and this single truth explains why so much misunderstanding exists between the two. The ordinary seeks shelter, stability, and safety, building invisible boundaries around their lives and convincing themselves that those walls are protection. Within those walls, they follow the rules that have been passed down to them. They repeat the patterns of those who came before, and they call that consistency wisdom. But extraordinary minds look at those same walls and see them as cages. They do not mistake limitation for security. They do not confuse repetition with purpose. Instead, they look upward, outward, beyond what is visible, and they begin to construct wings. To live with wings is to believe movement is greater than stagnation, that freedom is greater than safety, that possibility is greater than familiarity. Walls are not always physical. Most of the time, they are mental, social, and emotional. They are the walls of what is acceptable, what is normal, what is realistic. They are the silent messages people hear growing up. This is who you are. This is what you can do. This is where you belong. Ordinary people accept these messages and build their lives within the perimeter. They measure themselves by the standards that have already been established, and they rarely question if those standards were ever right to begin with. The extraordinary, however, does not take those walls as final. They look at them and think, why should this boundary define me? Why should this rule limit me? Why should this ceiling stop me? That questioning is the first feather of their wings. To build wings is to refuse permanence and limitation. It is to believe that you are not confined to what has always been. But this act of defiance confuses the ordinary. They look at the wing builder and see recklessness. They see danger where the extraordinary sees freedom. They say, why risk falling when you can stay safe within these walls? They cannot comprehend that for the extraordinary, falling is less terrifying than never flying. That is why misunderstanding arises. The ordinary evaluates everything by risk and safety, while the extraordinary evaluates everything by growth and potential. One measures comfort, the other measures expansion. The wall is predictable. It does not move. It does not ask questions. It does not require courage. The wing is unpredictable. It demands faith in something you cannot yet fully see. It asks you to trust the wind, to rise without guarantee, to face the unknown with strength. Most people choose the wall because it does not challenge them, but the extraordinary cannot choose it because it suffocates them. They would rather fail in flight than succeed in confinement. To the ordinary, this looks like foolishness. To the extraordinary, it is the only way to live. Every great leap humanity has taken came from someone who refused walls and chose wings. If walls had defined us, we would still be sitting in caves, afraid of fire. If wings had not been built, we would never have touched the stars. The ordinary could not imagine life beyond their survival, but the extraordinary imagined beyond survival into creation, into exploration, into transformation. That same spirit exists in every extraordinary mind today. It is the refusal to be limited by what already is, the insistence that there is more waiting beyond the wall, the unshakable belief that wings can take you there. Walls also provide validation. When people live within them, they look at others doing the same and feel reassured that they are not alone, that they are part of the group, that their way is justified because so many others are doing it. Wings provide isolation. When you build wings, there are few around you doing the same. You no longer find validation in numbers, you must find it in vision. That isolation is intimidating, and for many it is unbearable, but for the extraordinary it is the price of freedom. They do not wait for the world to validate them. They validate themselves by continuing to fly even when no one else joins them. Misunderstanding grows here as well. Ordinary people cannot understand why anyone would choose the loneliness of wings over the companionship of walls. They see the extraordinary standing alone and think they must be wrong. Because if they were right, wouldn't everyone be doing it? But the extraordinary knows that the path of innovation is rarely crowded at the beginning. The wingspan is wide enough only for those who are brave enough to carry it. Crowds come later, once the path is proven. But in the beginning, it is solitude and misunderstanding that are the companions of those who dare to fly. The metaphor of walls and wings plays out in daily life in subtle ways. The person who refuses to accept a job they hate, even when everyone tells them to be grateful, is building wings. The person who risks starting a business, writing a book, inventing something new, or pursuing a vision that others dismiss as impractical, is building wings. The person who speaks truth in the face of conformity, who challenges systems that are unjust, who refuses to stay silent when silence is demanded, is building wings. And every time they do, the people around them who live inside walls whisper, criticize, or shake their heads in disbelief. This is not evidence that the wings are wrong, is evidence that the wings are working. The extraordinary mind is not offended by the existence of walls. It simply refuses to be trapped by them. They understand that walls are necessary for some, that not everyone is meant to fly, that safety is a choice people are entitled to make. But what they cannot accept is the demand that they also stay inside. They cannot accept the pressure to conform, the pull to shrink, the expectation to abandon their wings. And so they are misunderstood, not because they are rejecting others, but because they are choosing themselves. Walls are about survival. Wings are about legacy. The ordinary person builds enough to survive their time on Earth, to protect themselves, to live without disruption. The extraordinary person builds enough to outlive their own time, to create something that lasts, to leave a mark beyond their own life. This pursuit of legacy makes them operate on a different scale, and that scale cannot be understood by someone who is measuring only in days and years. Legacy is misunderstood by those who think only in moments. But extraordinary minds think in centuries. To live with wings means to live with constant challenge, but it also means to live with constant possibility. To stay within walls means to live with constant safety, but also with constant limitation. The extraordinary chooses the harder path, not because they enjoy difficulty, but because they cannot live with limitation. It is not arrogance, it is necessity. Their mind was not built to be caged. It was built to soar, and to soar requires misunderstanding, isolation, and resistance. These are not obstacles, they are confirmations that wings are in use. Extraordinary success does not require approval because approval is built on recognition, and recognition often arrives only after the extraordinary has already proven itself. Waiting for approval is the language of the ordinary, those who cannot move forward until they have a chorus of voices telling them they are right. Extraordinary minds do not operate this way because they understand that vision is often invisible to others in the beginning. What drives them is not applause, not validation, not consensus, but a deep internal certainty that what they are doing matters even if no one else sees it yet. To depend on approval would be to hand over their destiny to the comfort zones of others, and extraordinary people cannot afford that. They know approval is fleeting and conditional, while vision is lasting and self-sustaining. Extraordinary success is born in solitude. It begins when someone dares to move in a direction no one else understands, and because no one understands, they do not receive encouragement. They move forward anyway. That act of moving without permission is what sets the extraordinary apart. The ordinary will not act until they are sure they will be supported. The extraordinary acts even in the silence of support, even under the weight of doubt, even in the face of ridicule. That willingness to walk without approval is the defining characteristic of leaders, innovators, creators, and visionaries. They do not need the world to clap for them before they start. They only need to hear the call within themselves. Approval can be dangerous for those who seek greatness because it creates dependency. When you live by approval, you learn to adjust yourself to gain it. You bend your vision so it pleases others. You shrink your dreams so they fit the comfort of the crowd. You dilute your originality so it matches what already exists. Approval demands conformity because people do not approve of what makes them uncomfortable. They approve of what feels familiar, what aligns with their own expectations. Extraordinary minds threaten those expectations, so they rarely receive approval at the beginning. But the extraordinary are not threatened by disapproval because they know that the absence of approval is often the clearest signal they are breaking new ground. Think about those who built legacies. They were not waiting for applause before they started. They did not stand in front of the crowd and ask for permission. They built in silence. They worked in obscurity. They trusted themselves even when everyone else doubted. Approval came later, after results were undeniable. And even then, approval was secondary, because by the time the world recognized their work, their identity was no longer tied to needing recognition. They had already proven to themselves what they were capable of. That is the difference between ordinary success and extraordinary success. Ordinary success is validated externally. Extraordinary success is validated internally. When you do not depend on approval, you gain freedom. Freedom to make bold decisions, to experiment, to take risks, to go after what feels impossible. Approval ties you to the expectations of others, and expectations are cages. People expect you to behave in ways that make them comfortable, to dream in ways that they can understand, to succeed in ways that do not outshine them. When you break those expectations, you often lose approval. But losing approval is not loss at all, it is liberation. It is the removal of chains that keep you tied to mediocrity. Extraordinary minds understand that, and they walk away from the need to be approved. The extraordinary also knows that approval is inconsistent. The same people who clap for you today may turn against you tomorrow if you make a choice that challenges them. The same people who celebrate your success may resent you when that success grows too large. To depend on approval is to live on unstable ground. Extraordinary minds build on something more solid, conviction. Conviction cannot be taken away. It cannot be manipulated. It does not change with the opinions of others. Conviction is what keeps you moving when the world disapproves, and it is what keeps you steady when the world suddenly approves too much. Without conviction, you are a prisoner of the crowd. With conviction, you are free to move regardless of the crowd. Disapproval, doubt, and even ridicule are not barriers for the extraordinary. They are fuel. Every time someone says it cannot be done, the extraordinary mind takes it as proof that they are moving towards something worth doing. Every time someone withholds approval, it sharpens their resilience. The absence of approval becomes a test of endurance, and those who endure long enough eventually discover that they did not need approval to succeed at all. Their success was never dependent on applause, it was dependent on persistence. And persistence is built when you learn to move without waiting for anyone to validate you. Extraordinary minds see clearly that the road to greatness is never paved with approval. It is paved with resistance, isolation, and misunderstanding. But those conditions are not weaknesses, they are advantages. They strip away the superficial. They force you to rely on your own clarity. They ensure that the only thing keeping you moving forward is your own belief, not the temporary approval of others. By the time success arrives, you are unshakable because you have already lived through rejection and kept going. That strength is what makes success extraordinary. Approval often comes only after it is no longer needed. Once you have proven yourself, once you have built the thing they said could not be built, once you have risen in spite of doubt, the same voices that withheld support will try to align with you. They will call you brilliant, visionary, determined. They will act as though they always knew you were capable. But you will know the truth. You will know that approval was not the reason you succeeded. You will know that if you had waited for them to believe in you, you would still be waiting. You will know that your success was extraordinary precisely because it was built without their permission. The extraordinary path requires you to stop asking, will they like this? Will they understand me? Will they approve? The only question that matters is, do I believe in this? Do I see it clearly? Am I willing to build it even if no one else believes? Approval is temporary. Vision is permanent. When you align yourself with vision, you no longer need the world to validate you. You become self-sufficient, powered not by applause but by purpose. And purpose outlasts approval every single time. Misunderstanding is not your obstacle. It is your proof that you are meant to lead, innovate, and change the future, because no one who has ever reshaped the world was fully understood in the beginning. The very nature of innovation means stepping outside what is already known, and once you step outside what is known, you automatically step outside what is understood. People cannot grasp what they have not yet seen, so when they look at you, they see confusion instead of clarity, threat instead of opportunity, and arrogance instead of conviction. But what they are truly seeing is their own limitation, their own inability to stretch their imagination to where yours already is. If you are misunderstood, it does not mean you are broken or wrong. It means you are standing in a place ahead of its time. The instinct most people have when misunderstood is to retreat, to simplify themselves until others can accept them, to shrink their vision so it can be digested by the crowd. But if you do that, you strip away the very thing that makes you extraordinary. Misunderstanding is not a signal to go back. It is a signal to go forward with even greater strength. It is proof that you are pioneering, that you are in territory where the ordinary cannot yet follow. Leadership is not about walking where everyone else has already walked. It is about carving a road where no path existed. Misunderstanding is the marker that tells you you are in the right place because it means no one else has been there yet. Every leader who ever changed history faced resistance disguised as misunderstanding. They were told they were too bold, too radical, too unrealistic, too different. The world dismissed their visions because those visions required people to confront truths they were not yet ready to face. But the fact that they were misunderstood did not weaken their mission, it confirmed it. To lead is to accept that you will be seen as strange until the world catches up. To innovate is to accept that people will call you unrealistic until your creation becomes indispensable. To change the future is to accept that misunderstanding is the price you pay for building something new. What ordinary people often call impossible is just unfamiliar. They cannot see what lies ahead, so they fill the gap with rejection. When you tell them about your idea, your project, your vision, they look at it through the narrow frame of what has always been, and anything that does not fit inside that frame is dismissed. They misunderstand not because you are unclear, but because their frame is too small. They misunderstand because they have chosen comfort over curiosity. If they allowed themselves to imagine with you, they would have to let go of the walls that define their lives, and that is too much for many to handle. So they misunderstand and label you instead, but that labeling is their defense mechanism, not your reality. To be misunderstood also means you are forcing people to think differently, even if they resist it. Your ideas plant seeds in their minds, seeds that may take months, years, or decades to grow. At first, they may laugh, dismiss, or criticize you, but deep inside, your vision lingers. That lingering is the start of change. Leaders, innovators, and change-makers often do not see the immediate fruits of their work, but they ignite sparks in others that eventually catch fire. Misunderstanding today can transform into admiration tomorrow, because once the results are visible, people suddenly reinterpret what they once dismissed. They call you brilliant when before they called you foolish. They call you visionary when before they called you unrealistic. They call you leader when before they called you arrogant. This shift is not because you changed, but because the world finally caught up to where you already were. Misunderstanding, then, is not a rejection of you, but a recognition that you are ahead. It is evidence that your mind operates in a space that others have not yet reached. The temptation is to crave understanding, but universal understanding is never the companion of leadership. If everyone understands you immediately, it means you are not far enough ahead. It means you are repeating what they already know, echoing what they already believe. True leadership creates a gap between the present and the future, and that gap is filled with misunderstanding until the future becomes the present. To walk in that gap requires courage because it can feel lonely and isolating, but it is in that space where all transformation happens. Those who let misunderstanding stop them remain trapped in mediocrity. They adjust their vision until it looks like everyone else's. They water down their originality until it tastes familiar. They trade their wings for walls because they think safety lies in being understood. But safety is not leadership. Safety is not innovation. Safety is not change. Safety is sameness, and sameness never reshapes the future. The misunderstood who keep going, who refuse to fold themselves into the comfort of others, are the ones who leave marks that outlast their lifetime. They are the ones who redefine what is possible. The extraordinary knows that misunderstanding comes with the territory of creating something that has never been created, speaking truths that have never been spoken, and leading in directions that have never been traveled. They understand that it is not their role to be understood, it is their role to be authentic. Authenticity does not always fit into the understanding of others, but it always leaves an imprint. Those imprints accumulate over time until they become the blueprint of the future. Misunderstanding, then, is not the barrier. It is the evidence that you are imprinting something new into the world. The greatest leaders in history, the most brilliant innovators, the boldest creators, all shared this same experience. They were misunderstood before they were celebrated. Their names were ridiculed before they were respected. Their work was ignored before it was immortalized. If you are misunderstood, you are walking the same road they once walked. That road is never easy, but it is always worth it because it leads to places ordinary minds cannot reach. Misunderstanding is not the weight that slows you down. It is the wind that proves you are in flight. It is not the obstacle in your path. It is the confirmation that you are on the right path. It is not a warning to stop. It is a signal to continue. If people do not understand you, it is not your responsibility to convince them. It is your responsibility to continue building, creating, leading, and innovating until your results speak for themselves. Those results will one day turn misunderstanding into clarity, doubt into admiration, rejection into recognition. But even before that shift happens, you must know that misunderstanding itself is already proof that you are extraordinary, that you are carrying vision, that you are walking in the direction of the future while others remain in the past.